Self-sabotage does not announce itself as destruction. It follows those who sincerely desire change but find themselves each time repeating patterns that quietly undermine that desire. You plan and imagine success, but when it is time to act, even the first step feels impossibly difficult. You hesitate, distracted by everything else around you. Time slips into harmless distractions that somehow consume entire days. This hesitation is often seen as laziness, lack of discipline, or insufficient motivation. But when you look closely, none of these explanations fully capture what is happening. The individuals most familiar with self-sabotage are rarely confused about their goals. They know what must be done. What they experience is resistance that intensifies not when action is difficult, but when action would matter. Sigmund Freud explained this using the concept of defense mechanisms, unconscious strategies the mind uses to protect stability by diverting attention from perceived threats. The mind doesn't worry about whether the threat is logical. It only reacts to whether the threat could disrupt stability. When an action risks destabilizing the internal order, attention is diverted elsewhere. At first, the threat appears external. Deadlines feel overwhelming. Expectations feel heavy. Fatigue feels legitimate. But these explanations serve the conscious mind. The deeper threat is internal. Action would require the emergence of a self the unconscious has not yet integrated. Change does not merely alter behavior, it challenges identity. This is why avoidance takes familiar forms, actions that feel purposeful but serve to delay real progress. For instance, the student scrolls through research articles repeatedly without starting the assignment. The writer repeatedly revises old drafts instead of starting new work, and the professional schedules endless meetings or seeks additional reports rather than making a decision. These are not failures of discipline. They are substitutions, behaviors that maintain activity while postponing transformation. Carl Jung observed that what remains unconscious directs behavior and calls itself fate. Self-sabotage is fate disguised as logic. The familiar discomfort of delay feels safer than facing the unknown cost of change, so resistance becomes strongest at the moment real change is required. The moment of hesitation is never random. It arrives when action demands a shift in identity. The mind resists not because the task is impossible, but because success would require becoming someone unfamiliar. Jung referred to the unintegrated aspects of the self as the shadow, not because they are evil, but because they remain outside conscious recognition. When growth requires contact with these disowned aspects, resistance appears. Behavior becomes the language of what cannot yet be consciously acknowledged. Consider the aspiring writer who plans meticulously but cannot write. The obstacle is not creativity or discipline. Writing would require exposure, authorship, and the acceptance of judgment. Success would collapse the protective identity of potential and replace it with responsibility. The unconscious recognizes this cost long before the conscious mind does. Freud's defense mechanisms explain how this resistance operates. Rationalization, distraction, and delay shield the psyche from anxiety. The fear is not limited to failure. Success itself threatens stability. The unconscious prefers the known discomfort of stagnation to the unfamiliar demands of growth. The evidence lies in repetition. Patterns repeat across time in different areas of life. The student delays starting assignments, the professional hesitates before pursuing a promotion, and the artist leaves canvases unfinished. Different situations, identical structure. What repeats is not circumstance, but identity preservation. Resistance often masquerades as reason. I need more time. I'm not ready. Tomorrow will be better. These explanations feel sensible because they arrive precisely when action would require honesty. Timing reveals their function. Resistance intensifies when stakes are high and excuses would no longer survive success. Viktor Frankl identified meaning as the axis that reorganizes behavior. The mind does not resist action. It resists action that lacks intrinsic purpose. When action aligns with values, endurance increases. When it serves approval or avoidance, hesitation dominates. Self-sabotage is not opposition to desire. It is conflict between desire and identity. Beneath every recurring delay lies emotion left unprocessed, anger that was never expressed, grief that was never named, shame that became part of how they see themselves, not just a passing feeling. These emotions do not disappear when ignored. They relocate into behavior. Jung's shadow does not communicate through language. It does not speak in words. It reveals itself through patterns, distraction and quiet withdrawal when it feels too unsafe to confront. What looks like a lack of discipline is often an unaddressed feeling quietly shaping behavior. Imagine a professional who keeps delaying career advancement. On the surface, it all seems reasonable: the timing, the risks, the responsibilities. But beneath those explanations lie deeper forces: resentment toward authority, fear of being seen, and shame carried forward from past failures. Freud called this repression, emotions pushed out of awareness, yet still powerful enough to shape choices. The evidence is not found in a single moment, but in repetition. The same resistance shows up at work, in relationships, in finances, and in creative pursuits. Circumstances change, but the reaction remains. This consistency points to something deeper than circumstance, a pattern rooted in the psyche. Self-sabotage thrives in partial engagement. Starting feels safe, finishing feels dangerous. Fragments keep hope alive without demanding change. But as the end approaches, resistance tightens. This is the psychological cliff, the moment when growth asks for a shift in who you believe yourself to be. The mind is not protesting the task. It is resisting the cost of becoming someone new. Frankl's insight helps explain this shift. When purpose is personally meaningful, resistance weakens. Service anchored in values sustains itself. When meaning comes from within, the psyche aligns. When meaning is borrowed or imposed, defenses rise. Awareness alone does not end self-sabotage, but it reveals its structure. When hesitation is observed without judgment, its patterns become visible. Delay stops looking like failure and starts functioning as information. Jung argued that the shadow loses power only when it is recognized. What remains unseen continues to guide behavior. Resistance itself is not the problem. The problem is when it goes unexamined. The artist who never finishes is not careless. The avoidance is precise. Preparation replaces exposure. Planning substitutes for risk. Freud described this as rationalization, a way to protect self-image while postponing emotional danger. Self-sabotage often hides behind the language of responsibility, making us think, "I should wait, I need to be careful, I don't want to rush." These thoughts feel reasonable, yet they conceal the hesitation beneath. Yet they appear at the same moments, when action would require honesty, visibility, or commitment. The paradox is clear. The mind protects safety even when that safety blocks fulfillment. Frankl offers a corrective lens. When goals are deeply chosen rather than inherited, resistance loosens its grip. The psyche follows values more readily than it obeys fear. Meaning reshapes motivation, starting from within. At this point, hesitation becomes readable. Each delay points to a specific emotional tension or identity conflict. The shadow no longer blocks progress, it becomes a guide. Hesitation does not dissolve through force, but through engagement. Shame, anger, and grief are not obstacles to growth. They are signals, indicating where integration has not yet occurred. Jung described the shadow not as what is broken, but as what was rejected. Self-sabotage is its messenger. Consider the professional who declines a promotion. Beneath careful reasoning may lie fear of visibility, resentment toward authority, or an uncertain sense of self. Freud understood defenses as mechanisms designed to preserve balance. Their function is protection, not progress. Partial engagement persists because it allows movement without consequence. Fragments preserve hope without accountability. Completion demands a revised identity. When action aligns with deeply held values, resistance loses its authority. It may still appear, but it no longer dictates behavior. Avoidance becomes manageable once it is understood. Every act of self-sabotage has a structure, an emotional origin, a protective function, and an identity threat. When these are acknowledged, hesitation turns into dialogue rather than obstruction. Self-sabotage does not end through conquest. It ends through clarity. You do not overpower resistance. You follow its pattern, ask what is being protected, and let hesitation reveal what needs attention. Jung insisted the shadow cannot be destroyed, only integrated. Every delay highlights something yet to be acknowledged. The writer avoids finishing because completion demands visibility. The entrepreneur hesitates because success requires self-definition. The student delays submission because evaluation threatens self-image. These are not flaws. They are signals. When action expresses values, hesitation diminishes. When purpose is clear, it steadies every step you take. Each act of avoidance becomes a mirror, reflecting emotional truth, identity tension, and unresolved values. Awareness converts inertia into movement. Resistance transforms from enemy into guide. The mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a terrain of choice. Hesitation is no longer an obstacle, it becomes a threshold. And when crossed with understanding, it leads to alignment, authorship, and deliberate action.